Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and this is part 2 of USPS. So let's go ahead and get started on this one, and that is the United States Postal Service. So it says here the USPS operates one of the largest civilian vehicle fleets in the world with an estimated 227,896 vehicles, the majority of which are the easily identified Chevrolet Grumman LLV long life vehicle and the newer Ford Utilimaster FFV flex fuel vehicle, originally also referred to as the CRV carrier route vehicle, made from 1987 to 1994, and with no air conditioning, no airbags, no anti-lock brakes, and lacking space for the large modern volume of e-commerce packages, the Grumman fleet ended its expected lifespan in fiscal year 2017. The LLV replacement process began in 2015, and after numerous delays, a contract was awarded in February 2021 to Oshkosh Defense to finalize design and produce 165,000 vehicles over 10 years. Now, what I want to mention here is that those vehicles, I know what they look like. They're small white cubes on wheels, basically. And I didn't know that they lacked all those basic features of a vehicle. No air conditioning, no airbags, no anti-lock brakes. I just think it's very interesting that the federal government doesn't care very much about its employees, because if they actually cared about them, they would have them in just basically nice vehicles that have airbags, that have anti-lock brakes, because I think those are just basic necessities within a vehicle. And also, they have been driving these kind of vehicles for a long time, and it's taken a long time for the federal government to wake up to the fact that these are not very good vehicles. Another thing it made me think of was I go walking in our neighborhood all the time, and I know not to get behind or walk behind one of their USPS vehicles because they are gas-guzzling vehicles. I don't know if they're diesel or not. I like diesel vehicles, but now they are made better so that they are polluting less. But if you're standing behind one of these vehicles, it is just like you're getting gassed. I mean, hopefully you don't have COPD, because if you do, it's going to be very difficult to walk behind these vehicles. And I don't have COPD, but it was hard enough for me to breathe. So I had to cross the street, or I had to change the time that I would go walking in our neighborhood because of the exhaust and the fumes from our postman's vehicle. And I just think that's really, it's hypocritical and sad at the same time that we have the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, which is a federal agency within the federal government of the United States, but we also have the USPS, which is a federal agency, again, within the federal government of the United States. And the EPA lectures us about our carbon footprint, about pollution, but yet you have a federal agency like USPS that has been polluting for years. They know their vehicles are not top of the line, and they know they smell bad, they're not safe, and they are polluting quite a bit. And I just think it's very hypocritical when you have one agency that is just lecturing the people, but then they're polluting themselves at a very high rate. So I'm just surprised that they haven't come out with a better vehicle sooner, and also just for the safety of the employees, because this tells me that the federal government doesn't really care about their own employees. So if they don't really care about their own employees, why would they care much about you or me, like our safety and things like that? Because it's hypocritical, and it just doesn't look very good, because it's not good for a government to behave that way. But moving on, it says, it is by geography and volume the globe's largest postal system, delivering 47% of the world's mail when they're not striking. That's the thing. You have to remember that statistics, once the data is printed, it's old data. So just look at it this way. If someone is striking and they work for USPS, they're not doing their job. They're not delivering the mail. They're not delivering my mail or your mail or anybody else's mail. So that rate to me would be quite a bit lower, considering how many times they have striked and how much mail they refused to deliver. So it goes on to say, for every penny increase in the national average price of gasoline, the USPS spends an extra $8 million per year to fuel its fleet. Now, what I'm thinking I should do, and I probably will do this, is I'll have an episode on this podcast that is dedicated to learning about fuel pricing in the United States. Because sometimes people get really angry about the pricing of fuel, and they think that it's all because of the so-called evil gas companies and things like that. There are so many taxes, state and federal, particularly federal tax, that is attached to every gallon of gas that is sold. So just because gas prices went up, it does not necessarily reflect that the company that is producing that gas is just inflating the cost and trying to make a bunch of money. Because here's the thing, you have all these taxes and fees that are sold on per gallon of gas. So it's not always the business owner, it's not always the producer of that fuel that is the problem. There are a lot of taxes that are associated with our fuel costs, and I'll give an example. My mom and I went to Italy several years ago. It was a religious pilgrimage, and I'm not religious by any means, but we went to go see these different sites of in Rome, Anna Capri, just really beautiful early Christian buildings and things like that, and it was really neat to learn the history. Well, when we got there were some people rioting. They were really angry, the Italians. And the Italians can gripe about almost anything, and they're funny, but this was actually really serious. Like, they were really mad at their government, and here's what happened. Their government in Italy is in charge of the pricing of fuel. So whenever the government thinks that people are driving too much over there in Italy, they jack up or increase the cost of fuel tremendously. So it punishes the citizens. Well, see, here's the thing. Just because their government raised the price on fuel, that didn't stop people from having to go to work or having to go to the grocery store. And that's why the Italian people were so mad. These rates were horribly expensive. And I'll give an example. Like, when we originally signed up for this trip, it was like a year in advance because you had to have so many people go in order for the trip to come to pass, right? Because you kind of got a semi-group discount. But there was this little disclaimer down at the bottom of the paper that we signed, our name and all that kind of stuff. It said this price could go up based on fuel. So not only could it go up because of the cost of jet fuel, it could also go up because of the cost of fuel in these other countries. So they passed that cost onto the consumer, onto the customer, onto the citizens, onto the visitors, onto the foreigners. Like, that's just how it works over there. So it was kind of one of those things like, you may be paying, I'll just make up a number, you could be paying $2,000 per person, but you could actually be on the hook for $1,000 more per person if the government of the country that you're going to visit has a huge hissy fit about cost of fuel and ups the price of it. That's the thing. So you don't want your government in charge of your health care or the price of gasoline or anything like that, because governments do not understand the market. They think they do. They try to preach that they do. They do not. They're actually quite horrible at managing money because they mismanage money. And there were so many different strikes taking place in Italy when my mom and I went. It was really sad because it's a beautiful country, but their people are frustrated. And the thing that just kind of dawned on me, I was thinking about, in case you're wondering what that bark is, that's the beagle that lives here at this apartment complex, very loud. But anyway, the thing that really got my attention was, the Italian people, they complain about almost everything, but yet they still keep voting in bad people. They keep voting in fascists, communists, socialists. It's like, if you keep voting in people that are pro-big government, then why are you surprised when your government overspends your tax dollars that you pay, wants to up taxes on everything, gasoline, bread, milk, toiletries, cars, everything, especially property tax sometimes over there. So it's just kind of like, I understand their complaints, but I think if you keep electing bad people into office, you really have no place to complain because you're the problem, not your leader. Because your leader reflects you and your choice and your vote. So if you continue to cast your vote for bad people, you really have no one to blame but yourself. Because I would think that, let's say, for example, we vote in a president and he or she just turns out to be really bad. Well, you don't vote them in a second term. You let them finish their term, and you just know in your heart, your mind, and your soul that you're not going to vote for them again because of stuff that they did and they didn't handle it well or whatever the case may be. But I don't know, there are just some countries in Europe that they just like to complain. They like to go on strike. They like to really be vocal, but when it comes down to it, they don't want to fix the problem. They just don't. And at some point, I get sick of hearing about it. And, there was, I'm trying to remember what strike they were having that was right in front of our hotel. We stayed at this one hotel in Rome. It was really pretty. It was close to where we need to be, like within walking distance. And we left on one day, and we were in Newark, New Jersey, I think, awaiting our next flight to come back home to Oklahoma. And we look up and we see the news, and there's this huge riot and just destruction. And it's right in front of our hotel, and like some of the windows of our hotel have been shattered. And these people were throwing another strike. They were having another hissy fit, and just violence broke out right in front of our hotel, and it damaged some of our hotel. And we were just there that morning. We had to leave super early to get to the airport in Roma, Italy. But I just thought, wow, I'm so glad we left because it was getting really dangerous. And that's the thing about Italy. It has pockets of danger. It can just spring up for no reason at all, or they can think they have a good reason, and it's like there's no reason for violence like that. It was really weird. So I don't remember what they were striking about with the destruction of part of our hotel. I don't know if that was in regards to the fuel, because they were striking about everything. If they could complain about something, they did. There was another strike that was going on in Italy. So we were in Pompeii. That was a really neat place to see the archaeological sites and things like that. And what I noticed was that there were all these young people walking around like they should have been in school. They looked like they should have been like middle school age or high school age, but for sure middle school age. I was like, why aren't these kids in school? They're just walking around. So I asked our tour guide, I said, hey, can you ask these young people why they're not in school? Because it's the school year. And I just kind of thought it was odd. So our tour guide says, sure. So she goes over there, speaks Italian to them, and asks them, hey, how come you're not in school? One of our American visitors would like to know. And they told our tour guide everything. And then our tour guide comes over and says they are striking. I was like, striking what? And I guess what happened was there was a minister of education that got elected, or she got hired to run the school system in Italy. And she was trying to privatize it because their school system basically sucked. It wasn't very good. And their education had gone down in Italy. And so she was trying to privatize it to make it better. Well, the teachers were very much pro-socialist, pro-fascist. I don't think they were communists, but they were definitely socialist and fascist. And so these teachers got all these students riled up and encouraged them to go on strike with them because they did not want to take orders from this lady that was trying to make their school system better. And so, trying to think what else. There were other things that were going on with their school system. So these students, they just refused to show up to school along with the teachers. They just went on strike. And my mouth just dropped. Like all of our mouths dropped in our group. Because I just thought, when I was their age, all I knew was who the principal was. I didn't know who the superintendent was, and I would have never known to go on strike. Like, who does that? Like, how defiant can you be against authority? But that's how Italians are, especially over in Italy. It's like, if I don't agree with you, I'm not going to show up, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to do what I want. Well, that doesn't work. And we can see that because their economy is not that great. It's been on the other side of the hill, so to speak. It's been going through a slump for a long time. This is nothing new. But what has happened over there in Italy is that because of their defiance, it has actually jeopardized their economy. It has jeopardized their government, and it is ruining their educational system. Unless, you're going to university, but I mean like pre-university years. It's ruining their education. So I don't even know if all their students are even able to get into universities, considering that if they're going on strike and not choosing to go to school, how can they graduate? And how will they know enough to get into college? That's the thing. Like, you have to be mindful of what you're irritated about and what you're striking against, because you could actually be shooting yourself in the foot. So that was one of the things that came to mind when I was thinking about the cost of fuel and just some of the things, the problems that people have in other countries. It's not just us. The United States is not alone in the problems that we have, but our problems are not as bad when compared to other countries. So that's why I don't ever want to be like someone else's country, especially in Europe, where they have a lot of socialism, because a lot of their countries, their currency is weak. A lot of their people either don't want to work, or they can't find a job, or they go on strike, or they keep electing the same bad people just continuously. And then they wonder why their countries are in the tank. And then they expect us to bail them out. And that's why I don't think our tax dollars should ever be sent to another country. They need to stay in the United States. Because that's the American thing to do. Like, we are not the world's piggy bank. If someone wants money and they're in another country, they need to go to their banking system and figure out what they can do. We are not responsible for other people's failures. They are responsible for their own failures, because what's interesting is that these other countries, they don't want to be responsible for their failures, but yet they want to take credit for their successes. So it's like, you know what, if you want to take credit for your success, then you also need to take responsibility for your failures. Because it goes both ways. Like, you have to call a spade. That's just how it is. And what I've learned is that the more socialist a country is, the less they want to be held accountable for their actions. The less they want to be held accountable for the spending of other people's money. They just want to spend money frivolously. Well, that's not being a responsible adult. So no wonder their kids they don't always have very good morals or ethics when it comes to monies, because their parents have been teaching them that, the government should just spend whatever it wants. Well, no wonder their economies are in the tank, and they don't understand basic business principles of supply and demand, accounts payable, receivable, taxes, audits, things like that, and having a budget. See, that's the thing. A lot of socialists, they don't want a budget because they don't ever want to hear the word no. They're like a little kid. They don't want to hear the word no. It's just like, at some point you have to take your Pampers off and grow up. That's the thing. Because if you never grow up, then you're never really going to see the fruition of your ideas. You're never going to be truly successful if you keep acting like a child. And that's what we see here in trade unions, labor unions, our federal government, our social welfare programs, and socialistic countries. Lack of accountability, overspending. Those things go hand in hand all the time with socialism and fascism, for sure, and communism, but I think it's worse than socialism, because communism, they just steal your money. They don't even care to tell you the truth. They don't even necessarily, they don't tell you the truth, but they also don't even care to hide the truth from you sometimes. They're just like, yeah, we're the Communist Party and we want your money because you don't deserve it. Sometimes they really are that blunt. Other times they lie and they make it seem like everybody else that's rich is stealing from you, so then they're hoping that these communists are hoping that you will vote for them, so that way they in turn can steal from the rich. They try and play the Robin Hood card. Well, they're not really being a Robin Hood in that respect. They don't really care about other people. And plus, there's no excuse to participate in thievery of any kind, because thievery is just that, it's thievery. To give yourself permission to do anything within that realm shows a lack of character and lack of ethics. We've already seen that in other economies and other countries, so probably shouldn't practice that in any way, shape, or form, because it's also illegal and immoral. But let's go ahead and finish up this section. It says the number of gallons of fuel used in 2009 was 444 million at a cost of 1.1 billion. The fleet is notable in that many of its vehicles are right-hand drive, an arrangement intended to give drivers the easiest access to roadside mailboxes. Some rural letter carriers use personal vehicles. All contractors use personal vehicles. Standard postal-owned vehicles do not have license plates. These vehicles are identified by a 7-digit number displayed on the front and rear. The Department of Defense and the USPS jointly operate a postal system to deliver mail for the military. This is known as the Army Post Office for Army and Air Force postal facilities, and the Fleet Post Office for Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard postal facilities. In 2013, the Postal Service announced that on Saturdays it would only deliver packages, mail order medicines, priority mail, and express mail effective August 10, 2013. However, this change was reversed by federal law in the Consolidated and Further Continuing Appropriations Act of 2013. They now deliver packages on Sunday only for Amazon.com, meaning that carriers make parcel deliveries 7 days a week. During the 4 weeks preceding Christmas since 2013, packages from all mail classes and senders were delivered on Sunday in some areas. Parcels are also delivered on holidays, with the exception of Thanksgiving and Christmas. The period between Thanksgiving and Christmas is the busiest time of the year for the USPS, with agency delivering an estimated 900 million packages during the period of 2018. Now, what I want to make a note here with this is that, several years back, back in the 1970s when they had that strike, it was during this time that they refused to deliver people's mail. So just imagine how many millions of packages they refused to deliver because they threw a hissy fit. So they didn't want to do their job. And they basically ruined a lot of people's Christmases. And they had the ability to do that because their agency has too much power. So if it had been me back then, I would have said, well, if you're not going to show up and do your job, then we're going to hire those lovely people that you call scabs, and we're going to do our job. Because if you're not going to do it, we will find somebody that will. Because that's what you do when you make a promise to the people. Because here's the thing, when people purchase postage, that's a contract between the sender and the post office. And the post office, once they take that money and they put postage on that package, they are obligated by federal law to deliver that package. But unfortunately, because this agency, which is a federal agency, has been given too much power, they were able to go on strike and not do their job. So if anything, I think all those people back in the 1970s, 1970, 1971, when the strike happened, all those customers should have been refunded their money. Because the USPS didn't do their job. So they basically took the money and said, we're taking the money, but we're not doing our job. Merry Christmas. That's basically what they did. If it's not right for you or me to do that, it's not right for them to do that. See, that's where you have to be cautious about the power of federal agencies. Because too much power always leads to a lot of problems. That's why we have 3 branches of government. It's so that not one branch can outrun the other or overrun the country. But unfortunately, when you have federal agencies with these bureaucrats that take over a lot of things and they're given way too much power, literally they have too much power and it's a problem. So it goes on to say, in May 2019, the Postal Service announced that it will be releasing a pilot of self-driving trucks, that sounds scary, to haul mail across the U.S. The 18-wheelers were developed by startup company Too Simple. The pilot will last 2 weeks, making 5 total round trips to cities across the country. What I don't like about self-driving vehicles is they have a tendency to kill people. So I believe that human drivers are better than computer drivers, for sure. Then it says, in early May 2020, the USPS's Board of Governors confirmed it's either Louis or Lois DeJoy would be the new Postmaster General. So that is it for this podcast. The next podcast will be part 3, and we will talk about operations and budget and maybe a little bit more. Because we're going over a little 20 minutes. I don't want to have this be too long. But just really think about what it means to have a federal agency and how much power do you want them to have. Do you really want someone to be able to walk out on the job and it halts everything? Because we've seen this before with the air traffic controllers. And that's why President Reagan at the time, when dealing with that crisis, he basically said, you have less than 24 hours to get to work or you're all fired. And he had every right to do that. Because it's not right for one group of people to punish the entire United States just because they don't get their way. They act like a little kid. Well, if you are an adult, you're not supposed to be acting like a little kid. Like if I'm not supposed to be acting like a child, then neither is anybody else that's over the age of 18. Because here's the thing, the age of reason, I think, is technically 7 or 8. So the thing is, it's like as children grow, you're trying to mold them and train them and mentor them to be responsible adults. What I don't understand about labor unions and certain federal agencies, it's like once they join a union or once they get into power in a federal agency, it's like all the rules go out the window. And they can become just this spoiled, rotten little kid that acts like a bully and doesn't have to behave in a appropriate adult-like manner. They can just throw a hissy fit and then try and get all the money that they want. And sometimes they do get all the money that they want, and then they're not responsible with that money. They act like an only child that is just spoiled rotten. And that's a problem. And that's not how federal agencies are supposed to behave. But here's the thing. These federal agencies are operated by adults. They're not operated by kids. So if they are an adult, which they are, they should act like one. And they should take into account that the job that they have, it's a form of service. Meaning they're supposed to serve the people, not the people serve them. That's where you understand how people look at power and how they utilize it, where they use power for good or for evil. That's how you have to look at it, because that's what's been going on with this. And that's what's been happening with USPS for several decades. This has been going on since long before 1970. Like, just because that's when they threw a hissy fit, that doesn't mean stuff wasn't happening before, for sure. But anyway, I will go ahead and end this podcast. So as usual, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, and that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.